Good morning, everyone. I'm so excited to be your host today, and my name is John Devlin, and I'm the conductor and music director of the Wheeling Symphony Orchestra. Now, we're here because we're just about a week away from our first movie of the Harry Potter series with the Wheeling Symphony Orchestra live to soundtrack. So you're going to see Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone on the screen above an 85-person orchestra creating the magical music of John Williams. And today we have a very special guest joining us. I live at 83 12th Street in Wheeling, West Virginia, and so does another amazing person 2 floors below me, who's Mary Beth Hughes, an amazing board member and friend of the Wheeling Symphony Orchestra. And her daughter, Molly, has an incredible relationship to the Harry Potter films that we're going to explore today. So we are so happy to have you here with us, Molly. Welcome to our little Zoom session today.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to come to the concert next weekend.
Now, you and I've gotten to know each other over the years, and I know you don't like to brag about yourself. So I'm going to do it for you and tell everybody that you are a luminary in the world of film and production design and that you have done so many amazing projects. You're an NYU trained set designer and that you shaped your career in off Broadway theater before joining the art department for Harry Potter and The Prisoner of Azkaban in 2002, one of the great films in the series, and that later on you became a production designer and you're a frequent collaborator, I know, with Ron Howard on projects such as 13 Lives and Hillbilly Elegy, and also with Charlie Kaufman on I Am Thinking of Ending Things. I know that you all are also a big advocate for gender diversity in the field and that you're a member of many of the key industry organizations, as well as an active teacher, and most recently worked with David Yates on Pain Hustlers, set previously in October of this past year. So it's so great to have you here, and it gives everybody a little bit of a background in what you are and what you do in the field. But could you just tell everybody a little bit first about your relationship with Harry Potter and what it was like to work on those films?
Yeah. Well, first, thanks for having me. It's so great, and it's so great to get to talk to you about this.
Yeah.
And I'm really thrilled to get to come and see the performance too. I don't get to come back that often, so this is such a nice celebratory event. My relationship with Harry Potter goes back a long way. When you said 2002, I was like, oh my God, that's so
That's 2 decades ago.
I was such a young person then. But I managed to start to work on the films. Prisoner of Azkaban was my first Harry Potter film. And I had worked for that production designer named Stuart Craig, who designed the whole series. I had worked for him on another film in the United States. He's British. In the United States called The Legend of Bagger Vance that Robert
Oh,
Redford
sure.
directed about golf and I don't know, golf and life, I guess.
That was Will
And
Smith, right?
yes, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was just out of graduate school. Was building models at that time and drafting and just desperate to get into the film industry, really. And there were so many talented people in that film. It was in Georgia and South Carolina, and watching these people at the top of their game really doing what they do best was really an amazing experience. And he said, well, if you think this is good, you should see what we do in the UK with like bigger departments, more training. They're better at training you from the ground up. And
Mm.
they were at that time. Now things are a little bit different here, thankfully, and there's much more accessibility. But at that time, there was much less. So it took a couple of years, but my at the time boyfriend, who then by that time became my husband, James, and I moved to the UK so that I could work on the third Harry Potter. He had a composer's visa, which is a sort of obscure visa that you can get in the United Kingdom. And on that visa, I could work in any field. So I managed to sort of finagle my way into the art department there, and that's how I got started as a model builder, just building white models. When you design a set, you start with hand draw. Back then, hand drawing. Now it's all computerized, and most of the models now are computer models. But back then, they were white models out of cardboard and hand drawings. And I did
Wow.
lots of doors and windows because I was just starting, and then sort of worked my way up to these very big sets, Malfoy Manor and the Weasleys and all of that. But
Oh, that
it was a very collaborative environment that when I look back on now, it kind of feels like it was definitely a family that I've stayed connected with. We actually watched all the films over Christmas in my family. My kids were both home, and they were showing on I think they started showing a couple days before Christmas. They just were showing all of them all the way through and then
Wow.
started again. So we started watching and then we kind of lost track of that, but then we decided to and watch them all together. And I think it's an incredible testament to those films that so many people of all ages, there's something about the films that has had this steady audience over the years. And I can't actually, it's a mystery to me exactly what that is. You probably have other thoughts about that, but being able
I
to
mean,
watch them with so much distance now, it's such a joy still to watch them. And I almost feel like, did I actually spend 10 years doing that? You know, it's great.
and you're right that it's such a uniting force, the
Yeah.
world of Harry Potter and Hogwarts. My family, when the book started coming out, I was an early teenager and I had two younger sisters, and nothing brought us together more than those books. We would camp out at Barnes and Noble at midnight on the night of the release, and we would buy a copy for each member of our family and race to finish each book. And we would not sleep until we had done so. And Jim Dale's voice with the books on tape were always playing in our car, in our home. Then, there were Harry Potter video games. And then all of a sudden, these movies came out, and the world that we had only imagined in our mind's eye became full and realized because of people like you. And I think that that's the next area that'd be fun to address with you is, when we are in school, there's a very limited amount of options as far as studying the arts. You're going to go in the theater route, the music route, the visual art route. But then we find out, that there are so many different aspects of the artistic community that you can find yourself in as a professional. I never thought I would be a conductor. I studied clarinet. You studied art, and then here you are probably running teams and building models and doing all sorts of things that are new to you, but the skills that you learned throughout your pathway are applicable. So why don't you talk to us a little bit about that, a career in the arts, how you got your start, you traced your pathway to the Harry Potter movies a little bit, but what was it that you studied, and then how did that turn into the career you have now?
It is funny, like you, I wouldn't have known. I came to it a little late, really, because I would never have known in high school. I didn't have the same sort of accessibility to film in high school. We didn't have streaming, right? So it's almost
Right.
like we just didn't have the same access to it. It was this sort of mystical thing out in the world where a film would come out and you all go and see it in the theater, and it might be a huge success or it might not be, but there weren't as many films coming out. And I had never thought, it didn't even occur to me until my third year of college that this was a career. And that was because I met some people. I was studying abroad and I met some people who worked or who were studying film in college. And someone just said to me, "You should be a production designer." And I was like, "What is that?" And and they said, "Well, you have to read the scripts and interpret it visually." And I thought, well, that is exactly both of my interests. I'm very interested in reading and interpreting and thinking about writing. And I also am very interested in visuals. So I started to look into it. And the more I got into it, the more I realized like this is a perfect fit for me, but how do I do this? So I was in school in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and there were some classes at North Carolina School of the Arts. And so I went over there and just met with the person who was doing set design courses.
Mm-hmm.
There were no film design courses, but there were set design courses for theater. And I discovered that people were doing set design for theater and then moving into film that way. And so kind of on a whim, when I was graduating, I decided to apply to a program at NYU that was supposedly set design and film design. It turned out to be mostly set design back then, but now they have a pretty thriving film design program. But and somehow I kind of talked my way in. My portfolio was not good. Like I don't really know how I got in, but I was passionate, which goes a long way in what I do. And so I got in, and then I really had a 3-year intensive learning process, learning curve, and full of humiliation and success and also success at other points. But it was an amazing time to be among people in New York City be creating and always being creative and thinking about text in a visual way. So that's sort of how that all happened. It
Right.
was a long trajectory.
You know, when young artists ask me for what is your best piece of advice,
Mm.
um, my answer is bloom where you're planted and work your hardest at whatever opportunity you have at the moment. But the second best piece of advice I have is find the thing about which you are most passionate, but don't stop there. You must also discover the thing about which you are second most passionate and figure out a way to combine those two things. Because if you just say, I want to work on movies or design set, like you're one of a million people who want to do that. But if you find your second love, like you said, visual and stories, the word and the art, then all of a sudden you're finding something that's very unique to yourself. For me, initially, that was conducting, which there are a lot of people out there that want to conduct. And I combined it with food and created an orchestra that paired food and music. And now I feel exactly the same way you feel as I did my first movie ever last year with Jurassic Park. I was like, all of a sudden, the thing that I do for professional life as a conductor, combined with the thing I do in my free time for fun, which is love these stories. It can be Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter or Star Wars or Marvel, and now I can do both of those things at the Wheeling Symphony Orchestra at the same time. I feel like I found a home doing this, and it excites me beyond any other type of concert. And so that's thrilling to hear that you had a similar journey where you're like these stories can bring to bear all of the things that you're good at and care about. Because isn't that beautiful when those two things unite?
Yeah, I feel very fortunate. I mean, every day to be able to have a creative career and a viable one. And I think that that like you said, finding it and then being honest with yourself about what your skills are and what your path could be is a big part of that. I mean, like what you were saying about bloom where you're planted. Because I thought for a minute I could do set design for theater, and I'm
Mm,
actually not very good at it. So, but I think it's because I'm so excited about film as a medium, which is very different than theater. I have a film director that I work with, and she's also a theater director. And she sometimes is like, maybe we should do a play. And I'm like, oh, can I even do that now? And I probably could, but it's not the same. There's a real psychology to what we do. And it's very similar to music. The psychology of the character is so important to what we do in design that
mm,
that is and there's so much detail involved. And in theater design, it's kind of like the big statement, of what is the play saying. Whereas in
right.
film, there are so many little opportunities that are part of the design process to tell the audience who we want them to think the characters are and kind of control that and tell that story. But I think for students, one of the things, and if I just show a little bit of work, the amazing thing about the art department is there are so many avenues that you can explore. Now, yes, I'm a production designer, but I spent a lot of years before that working basically every category. I started as an art department assistant, printing drawings, building white models, and then started drawing small sets and moved on to bigger sets. And by the end of that, you're communicating with construction and painters and model makers and plasterers and the set decorating team is a whole huge department that has a different set of skills
Right.
required for it. So I thought maybe we could, if I share my screen a little bit, we could just look at a few things and I could talk a little bit about what's involved. So here we go. So well, everyone will recognize this. This is how I started. So when I arrived in the UK, I was mostly just building models. This is a model of Hogwarts in our art department that over the years, this is how it was at the end of Harry Potter 7. Uh, but over the years, it changed. You would, with every movie, I think anyone who is a fan will know that it kept changing position on the mountain, or accessibility would change, or like the owlery moved, or the boathouse moved, or the greenhouse moved. But so and I think we added an extra courtyard at one point. But so this is what an example of a white model is. And so the skills required for that are a little bit different than some of the other things in the art department, but you have to be good with a knife, basically.
Mm.
and,
And you said
and
that this is cardboard?
yes, it's cardboard, foam
Oh my
core and
gosh.
cardboard. And these are like little pieces of balsa wood, they call it, really soft wood that you can cut
Okay.
into into small pieces. Requires an enormous amount of patience. But some people love it. I actually used to love it. I don't love it now. I couldn't do it now, but I did love it when I was younger. Uh, and then this is an interesting thing. I'm sure people have
Wow.
seen this. This is the model of Hogwarts that was used in the film to shoot all of the big wide shots of Hogwarts and then when they're flying around, and they would film this with, it's a miniature, but I would say one of those towers is as tall as a person. So it has a lot of detail in it. And the people that make this are craftsmen. There are craftspeople who just do miniatures. And for a while, miniatures sort of disappeared because of visual effects, but they've come back. I think people are finding that there are a lot of miniatures used in the movie Barbie this year. If
Mhm.
anyone ever wanted to look that up, you would find that I think people are finding it's more affordable to do to actual miniature than to use visual effects, or at least start with a miniature that then you can enhance with visual effects. So they had, camera moves around this model, and then you would just add Harry standing here, with visual effects afterward. But yes, this is the model that was used.
And when they're doing scenes where there's flying around Hogwarts and such, do the actors act that in front of green screen and then this gets imposed over the green screen area?
Yeah, that's correct. Anytime they were on their brooms, they were in front of green screen and with a big fan blowing on them, basically.
Sure.
And they were on a wire also, so that if they fell, they wouldn't actually fall. They
Right.
were well supported.
And then do you just use like robotic or jib cameras around this and get every single angle possible and then that rotates the way that the camera would rotate with the actor on the green screen?
Yes, and sometimes and very special cameras, and also it would be in pieces too. It wasn't
Uh-huh.
always put together like this. You would have a piece of it that you would use. This is what is now existing in the Harry Potter Museum in London as a unified thing. If anyone ever gets to go to that, it's probably the best example of the work what the art department and costume department and camera department did on the films, and all these models and sets are there. It's pretty amazing.
Oh man, that's incredible. And speaking of this type of work, and you mentioned earlier portfolio, and you also talked about the types of skills that you needed to have at the beginning of this journey, where you said a lot of everything was practical, and then you said everything is drafted on computers now.
Yeah.
Could you talk to us just a little bit about the journey as you like develop and hone your craft, but the industry changes rapidly alongside you? How did you develop your portfolio at the beginning of your career and then keep up with the developments of the industry during your career?
Yeah, so I used to draw by hand, which is
Okay.
what you can see here. This is like one of the hallways at Hogwarts and how it's used. And a lot of students who are studying set design or film design learn to draw some basic things by hand first so that you can understand how construction works. Then they move quickly into computer drafting, which is
Okay.
CAD drafting or SketchUp. There are so many programs that you can learn that are useful. So in here, this is a computer drawn set. So this is a couple of years later. And in our case, Warner Brothers was very supportive of our move into computer drafting. I think they thought we'd get work done faster, maybe. So they purchased the drafting programs for us and all these big computers, really nice computers for us so that we could, and paid for our training so that we could keep up with the times. And it also helped our communication with the visual effects team that we were working in computer, it kind of took a step out of that. So some of the people would learn 3D modeling, and then they could very easily pass off a 3D set, modeled set, to visual effects, who could then do what they needed to do with it to have whatever was going on, a fire, um, people flying around, so it did speed up that process, and for them, I'm sure, save them money, which is all they cared about. But oh, this is Slughorn's office when he brings Ron in, and Ron drinks the wine and then convulses. I think it's the Half Blood. Is it the Half Blood Prince?
Yeah,
I
that's
don't
where
know.
Slughorn makes
I
his
knew them by
appearance.
number, so not
Yeah.
name. So so that's one of these sets, and you'll recognize, this is kind of funny because some of this is the same architecture that we used for the Room of Requirement, and we just reused it.
Sure.
So the only thing that's different is I drew these little columns and then they were made. And so this is a plasterer in our plastering department, sculpting these beautiful columns.
I mean, look at that.
So again,
Wow.
that's another aspect of the profession. It's huge. The construction, paint, and plastering departments on a film are enormous, and that they're also a great way in to the art department if you're skilled at those things, and you get to
Right.
build some crazy sets, as you can see in movies that you see,
Right.
spaceships, all kinds of things. And people are always pushing the envelope in the construction, like they're always trying to figure out, one, how to build it quickly, two, you have engineering involved all the time, how to build it safely. So this is a set for the Weasley's house. So this was all that was built of the exterior, just this bottom part, and the rest was done with visual effects.
And what a challenge, right? Because the Weasley's house is inherently unsafe
Yes.
engineering wise.
Yeah. So my point of that was, so when you see the inside, it was a different set. You didn't shoot this is outdoors. This is right before the burning down of it. And everybody was there because it was like an emotional time to be burning down the set. I mean, it didn't really burn to the ground, but they had to catch it on fire. So the inside of that set is, everything is twisted and turned, and the same with Diagon Alley, everything is twisted. And we have to have engineers involved who come in and make sure everything's safe and figure out how to build things safely and securely. So again, the scope of career type within the art department is very broad. So this is right before we were burning it. This is all camera department puts up these huge lights, and then this is blue screen, so they can control anything out there is done with visual effects, and it's usually above a person's head. So anything, because when you have to create behind a person's head, it gets very expensive because they call it rotoscoping. They have to keep cutting the person out in every frame. But here we tend to try and build set up past the person's head, and then up there it's easy to put in anything once you have some blue screen there. And then this is how they made it look like there was a fire burning. So they put people here. The camera's on the Weasleys, and it looks like they're looking at a burning house, but actually this flame over here on the right is just reflecting back on their faces, and the fan is blowing, so that you get that lighting effect of them looking at a burning house. Hope I didn't ruin that for anybody.
I mean, just hearing you talk about this and seeing these visuals, and some of which you went by so fast, I was like, "Stop! I want to see that."
I'm sorry.
But I think the point is, it's humbling to see all of the work that goes into this. When at the end of the first time you see a movie, it's typically an impression of, I liked it or I didn't like the way it looked. And then you focus in on the actors, right? But I think that this is an opportunity when we go see the film, like we're going to see it next weekend.
Yeah.
The music is being created for you in the most visceral way possible. And it will give us a chance to focus on the music in a slightly different way. And then this type of conversation allows us to think more broadly about every single thing you see on the screen was imagined, created by, designed by a human that is a creative person on the team here. So when you are watching the end credits, please stay and appreciate every single one of those names. And then at the end of the credits, give the orchestra a big cheer, because there's 20 minutes of music for the end credits. That's
Yes.
wildly difficult too, you know?
Yeah.
So what is your advice to people as they're at the movie this weekend and of course enjoy yourself and love the story. But if they wanted to appreciate the intricacy of the visual design and the world creation, like what is something that you look at when you watch movies that gives you an appreciation for the craftsmanship there?
Well, I just want to feel immersed because I work in the field and I dissect everything that I see so
Right.
automatically now that if the film is good and the music is good and the acting is good and the costumes are good and the wigs are good, that's always a big one for me. You
Big
know,
one.
then you're immersed and then you just feel like you can watch the film. And I when we went back and watched the Harry Potter films, over Christmas, it was incredible to be totally immersed in them. And I only had a few moments of, oh yeah, I remember when we did that. Because they're so well crafted, because you're carried along by the visuals, by the music, by the story in a way that you're not pulled out to think like, oh, that looks kind of weird or that looks bad. Like watching a movie, this must happen to you, that has bad music. I'm not I'm not a musical person, but if the music doesn't fit, I am taken out of the film a little bit.
Mhm.
And I think that's the same with the visuals. So I hope people, because of Harry Potter doesn't have either of those issues, I hope people will just have fun and watch it and appreciate all of the miraculous detail in both the visuals and the music, and enjoy the process.
I think that that's a beautiful way to end our conversation here. It's a process, yeah, and these stories are so important to so many. And thank you for what you contributed to bring them to life in such an exciting and imaginative way. Molly, we can't wait to be at the Capitol Theater with you in just a week. There will be a pre-concert discussion that you and I have an hour before showtime that highlights a little bit more of the work that you did on these films, and we'll have a little bit of time for question and answer. If people enjoyed this conversation and want to interact with you more, we'll see everybody at the Capitol Theater for Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Thank you, Molly, so much for being here.